the most important thing if you want to have a stable, integrated Eurasia in terms of developing economic architecture that allows countries to cooperate more and manage the competition in a peaceful manner. The two main pieces you want to get to fit together would be India and China, given that, well, Russia has well, great relations with both countries. But what is it that you think China can do? Because you mentioned they're standing by and, well, watching how this is developing. Because, but also China, of course, it's the whole, you can say, the great year it had in terms of having this resilience to U.S. pressure, continued growth. It's the concern, of course, in India is that the power disparity between China and India would be too great. And and I've been also on a few of those debate programs on Indian TV, and there's always this very rational, sensible discussion, except when on the topic of, for example, Taiwan. Then I noticed they all become they view this in this prism of territorial conflict, and then they all turn very hostile. It seems. I'm not going to say everyone. That's a bit too much, but it appears that the border issues, this is an issue. The economic disparity is an issue. Do you see any initiatives on India's part in terms of seeking to alleviate some of this or finding some solutions? Because this could be a time of opportunity. That is, when the hegemon is pressuring too much for loyalties, this is when the multipolar solutions can pretty much, just open the door to countries like India, who doesn't want to be anti-American, but it doesn't want to fall under hegemonic control either. But do you see any initiatives there on the Chinese side?
From China's side, they just keep talking about trade and trying to figure out ways they can buy more from India. The problem is India does not have a tremendous amount of things to offer China. I mean, China is the factory of the world. They produce very, very efficiently, and their businesses work on much lower margins than Western and practically any other business from any other country in the world. I mean, they'll go down to 2-3% return on investment. That is really, really low. And in the United States, if you don't show an 8% return, you're not going to be able to get financing either privately or through a bank. Maybe they'll go down to 7%, but if you say, "Oh, look, my business is going to make 2%," all right, like, you need to go somewhere else, sir. We don't service those kinds of businesses. So China is in a position where it's not going to be easily competed. And India has to find a way and do it. Now, China is willing to buy. It's not China, it's not the government who's going to buy stuff from India. It's consumers, and China has a massive consumer market, but you have to cater to it. You can't just say, here's something from India, buy it." So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. There's real concerns with India, and it's understandable about regional influence. They see China's trade, in 150 plus countries that are part of the BRI, and many of those have their number one trade relationship is with China, and that's very hard to compete with. And the irony is that India was concerned about Chinese influence over Bangladesh and Nepal and these neighboring countries, and it turns out it was the U.S. who undercut these relationships. So, I mean, India is still trying to figure out how it's going to do it. There's also how to put this, a real cultural divide. The Chinese tend to try to be friendly up front, and then when they get down to the details, it's real brass knuckles in terms of negotiations, things like that. The Indian approach is different. They start out and say, "Well, what do you offer?" All right, and they make it seem like you owe, them some sort of, that you owe India. And that doesn't sit well with China. It says, look, we're here to trade. We don't owe you anything. If you don't want to trade, okay, we'll leave. And India says, what are you doing? You're not being sincere. You're not being friendly. You should offer something. Well, the Chinese have learned that you don't make the first offer. You have to figure out areas where there can be mutual trade. Obviously, India has benefited from the relationship. What people don't realize is that the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is located in Beijing, has members from all. China does not have veto power over it. But guess who has been the largest recipient of loans from the AIIB, both in numbers and in terms of total value? India. So they can't say that China is somehow harboring a grudge against them. Now, the AIIB looks at these things, these loans, in terms of their ability to repay. Are these ongoing, workable ongoing projects? And India has been very good at putting together projects that show feasibility, and therefore they get the loans. But India needs a lot more of it. We have a country where, many businesses have issues about locating there because, there are scheduled brownouts, sometimes blackouts. So how are you going to run a factory if you know that for 4 to 6 hours a day, you will not be able to operate, or your machine will be operating at less than optimum. You'll have to have diesel powered generators or something like that to make it up. That increased costs. So India has to figure out a niche for it, and it cannot expect any country, whether it's the U.S., Europe, or China, to solve its internal issues. They like to say, well, we have a huge market, but a large part of that market is very poor. They're concerned with necessities, not choice economy, products and services and things like this. And China is a place where it's more about added value. You start talking about necessities, it's about food and seed and fertilizers, basic things that you can do. India has a tremendous number of STEM graduates, people who are excellent engineers. They used to and still are a huge body shop for these tech companies in terms of everything from HR down to coding. Although coding is going away, there's still other things there where you need intelligent bodies in order to get things done, and they can do that. But they have to get away from that. It's kind of like raw materials. You're providing the raw materials, but you're not really getting the added value. If you're exporting coffee right now, the coffee price goes up, but guess what? The farmers are the ones who get the pressure on them to the prices to them go down. The same thing with India, as there's pressure on wages and things like that. They're not getting more business, and the business that's there because of how tight the world economy is. They are actually the prices are going down, so they're not wages are not going up stratospherically except in areas. So India has to solve this. This isn't something where somebody else can come in and say this. So I think India would be poised with its young population, its educational institutions, to do more in terms of developing its own products. You've never heard, how many Indian CEOs do you know from the US who are running these big companies, Microsoft, Google, you name it? Why aren't they in India? Why aren't there Indian companies doing this? They certainly have the raw power, they certainly have the business acumen, but it's just not happening. Some in India point to this issue about caste systems, about these dominant families, the Tatas, Ambanis, Andanis, etc., and how they kind of have a almost stranglehold on everything. It's an incident where India said, "Oh, we're going to build our own submarines," and the winning bid was put together by a major family, which had opened up a company that said they could make submarines a couple of weeks before the bid. And there's real questions about whether this is crony capitalism, things like this. So there are internal issues India has to address, and it has to have its own strategy. China isn't telling it what to do. Certainly willing to buy anything. That Chinese consumers are certainly willing to buy anything. But if there are bad relations between the countries, you'll see Chinese consumers moving against it, as you've seen with Japan. There's a lot of feeling right now about the Japanese after statements by the prime minister, things. But if you step back, this is all playing very well into Donald Trump's playbook, which, as you pointed out, is about divide and conquer. He's been pushing this kind of I'll take everything from Greenland down to Argentina is mine, kind of an expanded, kind of act. What do you call it? Right. I forget the name of it. It was named after a president where he's, just said, look, this South America belongs to us, and anyone goes there, it's an act of war. Now
Monroe
extending
Doctrine.
that to Monroe and Monroe Doctrine. Ironically, I think it was way down, about 30 or 40 or 50 things down in Monroe's State of the Union address. It was just kind of a throwaway thing. And by the way, Europe, stay away from South America. But it was way, way down the list. But it then became a staple, a kind of pillar of American policy. But now they're expanding that to the north, saying, that both Canada and Greenland are going to be somehow taken or, forced to join this consortium. And then, the rest of the world, he figures that Europe, Russia will carve up something or keep fighting, and then China will take whatever it can. But I think Donald Trump is dealing in an old mindset. He really believes that the world is all about, being the victor, being, the dominant player, that there's a winner take all, lose. There's only winners and losers in the world, and the pie is only so big. China has a different approach, as they've been pushing. They say, the security, development, global governance, and also this civilization initiatives, which are what they want to use to replace ideology instead of telling countries what they should be. Right? In terms of ideologically, they're just saying, hey, this is all things we want: security, development, respect, and means of settling our differences with talks rather than tanks. So, I mean, this is the way the world is seen from China's point of view. At least this is what they've been saying for the last 12 years, since the 2013 and the Belt and Road Initiative. But going back to this issue, what can India do? I think India needs to interact more with the global South, with BRICS in particular, with the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which also stands for these principles of internal security. It's not a defensive mechanism against outside entities. It's about protecting countries from terrorism and separatism and extremism. But that's internal, as countries coming to each other aid with they're threatened by terrorists or people who are trying to destroy the country. So very different. But if India were to side with BRICS, right, with the rest of the BRICS players, and it was to come together, it could have a profound effect. And by that, people say, well, what's the difference? They're going to go, okay, so they go try to beat up Washington, and then you get into this protracted, maybe Cold War, and everything goes bad. I disagree. I think there's a couple of things that India can do. First off, the digital tools that are available today allow small, medium-sized enterprises to enter the global market. That you can use the internet. There are systems to advertise. If you make good honey, you find people. There are lots of groups on Facebook and Instagram and Reddit and all these things where people talk about honey. Well, advertise there. Then, in terms of logistics, the logistics are there. Things can be sent around the world very, very, very quickly. And then there are payment platforms that allow to make sure that you are, in fact, going to get paid. And the consumer is going to get the goods that they bargained for. So that is something where India, which doesn't, has a few big family consortiums, most of them are small businesses, and this would offer an opportunity for them. And the second is by working with BRICS, I think they could gather Global South and say, look, it's time to turn the resource curse into a resource source. And by that, I mean putting together these, and I've talked about this before on this program, putting together these forces. 4 countries are responsible for 70% of the world's coffee exports. Why don't they get together and start saying, okay, we're going to price coffee at a price where our farmers can make a profit, where we can deal with climate change issues, where we can deal with our own development issues, and stop, being the low man on the totem pole when it comes to these price issues. The fact is, why is it that 4 companies from the United States and Europe control the coffee trade and price in the world? Doesn't make sense. They don't grow it. They grind it and they prepare it and they make a heck of a lot more money than the growers, but it doesn't make sense. And you could do this across the board, whether it's other things like cinnamon, or you're talking about iron ore. If these countries come together to form their own bourses, just as OPEC did with oil, it could make a profound difference, especially for the global South. I mean, you saw it. I mean, I'm sure you were shocked at what happened at the what was the top 30. I mean, nothing. I was a signal to the rest of the world that help is not coming. Empty promises do not create climate change initiatives, right? And there is going to be nothing coming from countries, especially the major countries, who are growing at a smaller rate than the developing countries. So that's gone. It's time for the rest of the world to make a world which they want, instead of trying to follow along, picking up the breadcrumbs or whatever is left by the former colonial powers who dominated the world. Their time is finished. They're not willing to put anything in, and that was quite clear in COP30. So India's opportunity here, and why it's so unique, is that it was basically taken for granted by the U.S. that it would play a part in containing China. Now it could be a major player, a leader in changing global governance and economics in a way which the U.S. would have to respect.